Hello, welcome to another Mundane Monday. I'm Sally Ducharme, and it is Monday, February 20th, 2023. And the chart I've been looking at a lot this past week is the chart of Bruce Willis. We think of the sun as being a luminary. Movie stars certainly would fall in that category. And last week, just as Saturn met that sun in conjunction in Aquarius, we received the sad news that Bruce Willis, who had retired last year due to aphasia, has experienced a progression in his symptoms and now is being diagnosed with frontotemporal dementia. And so I was thinking about, what magic he has created for all of us film goers over the years. And I was wondering what in his chart would explain that magic. We do have a time chart. And so we will look at planets, angles, and houses. I'll start with the Hellenistic challenge to see what the 7 traditional planets would tell us about Bruce Willis and his amazing, good fortune, we would call it, and his success as a film actor. And so let's start first with, when you consider luck in a chart, we would look at the primary benefic, which, because he was born during the day, would be that Jupiter in Cancer. And this is what I would call a super duper Jupiter, because it's not only, Jupiter itself, but it is in the sign of its exaltation. Cancer is a sign that loves to grow and nurture things. You put Jupiter in there and it just goes gangbusters. But also, Jupiter in the 11th house is considered to be in its joy. This is the house of friends and groups, and if you're a public person, it would be your audience. So all of this wonderful, beneficent growth is going to be in that area of his chart, that he will be able to build and grow an audience, and that it stayed with him through decades. He started as an actor in the 70s, is shown by the trine from Jupiter to Saturn in his chart, giving him that longevity. And if you look at this wonderful Jupiter, notice that it powers his Pisces, Mercury, and Sun and Descendant. And so we think about a Pisces Sun and Mercury also being wonderful for an actor because of its chameleon-like quality. We noticed that Bruce Willis was able to kind of go seamlessly between, action movies, comedy, romance, drama throughout his career. So he had that wonderful ability to kind of be whatever the part demanded of him. And so we see that Jupiter falls kind of a trine at a midpoint between that Mercury and Sun. And the Sun is also enhanced by the fact that it's right here on his descendant. Any planet near an angle in our chart is considered particularly powerful. And so at the descendant, the Sun just is very good at connecting. People who see him, they like him. I would imagine a lot of his success is dependent on the fact that he was just a good guy to work with. People enjoyed him, wanted to work with him again. And so his ability to kind of just meet people, get interested in them, have that kind of friendliness that everyone responded to. Also, you think of the Sun with the descendant or the 7th house as being a notable partner. Something about the partner kind of glows or shines. And so definitely, if we consider Demi Moore, his wife of quite a few years, one of the most beautiful and talented actresses in the world, certainly fulfilling the promise of that Sun on the descendant. But if we look at other things in his chart, we notice that he's got the Moon and Venus in the kind of cool sign of Aquarius. So if we look down here, here's his Aquarian moon and his Venus in Aquarius. And so that gives him that kind of emotional detachment, that sort of coolness, that he's not showing that much bothers him, that he's able to kind of, I don't know what the right word is for, seem engaged, but yet always have something that he's holding back a little bit. So that's I think adds to some of his charm. You'd also think about humor too with Aquarian planets. But notice that Mars in Taurus is in square to that Venus in Aquarius. And so we've got this combination here of someone who is, kind of ironically cool and detached, and yet Mars in Taurus exerts that physicality. So if you think back to his roles, you can certainly, even going back as far as Moonlight, he was very kind of cat-like in the way he could move around and look very handsome. But yet he had that sort of twinkle in his eye and that way of smirking. And that was just very attractive. And so those two qualities kind of in contrast to each other created that kind of sexiness that sizzles. But also notice what's going on with that Mars. It's opposing Saturn in his chart. And Saturn in Scorpio, think of something dark and heavy and powerful there. And so you look at the chart and you see that Mars completes a T-square with that Mars-Venus square. And so success always depends on a certain amount of tension in one's chart. And so this T-square helps him kind of bring that energy out into the world. He's often pitted against, when you think about Saturn in Scorpio, think Hans Gruber, in his chart, he would also have that pitting himself against something dark and very formidable. And with that Mars as an individual, being able to fight against it. And then also with the Venus in Aquarius there being very cool and detached while he's doing it. And so that T-square adds to the power of his chart. And then one other thing, if we're looking at squares in his chart, notice that he's got a square from his sun to his midheaven in IC. And so that sun placed, so powerfully with his descendant in square to his midheaven suggests that becoming a famous person was pretty stressful for him. He just wants to be kind of an ordinary guy going about his life. And we see that he would find that irksome to have that pressure of fame put on him. And it could stress his home life and square to his IC as well. And then just another interesting thing about this MC in Gemini, he had really two careers. He was a movie star, of course, but he loved to play music, and he toured and recorded and had a band. And so I almost get the impression reading about his life that was even more of a passion for him than acting was. And so those are all the aspects I wanted to point out with the Hellenistic challenge. So let's go ahead and add in then the outer planets, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, and I think Chiron is included as well, one of the centaurs. And so at this point, let's go back to that Jupiter that we started with, and what is happening to his Jupiter then once we add in the outer planets. Notice that it's sextile. It's conjunct with Uranus. This was a very potent time when Jupiter and Uranus came together. It happens about every 12 years or so. It's usually it's like when inventions kind of take off. This was late 54, early 55. A lot of things were after World War II, television started being developed. The first computers were coming along then. And so it's a very exciting time, very inventive time. But also, if you think of people born around the same time as Bruce Willis, one was Steve Jobs, who was born under this conjunction. James Cameron was another person who was born during this conjunction. So Bruce Willis has that just kind of inventive, creative energy that was in the sky at the time, kind of baked into him with his chart. And so you certainly saw that as he progressed as a movie star, he created a style and a way of acting that was all his own. He also was able to make a jump that not many actors did at that time, from working in television in a series to being a big time movie star. And so that's one thing that I think is shown by this inventive conjunction. And notice, going back to what we talked about with that Saturn, anchors that. So this is somebody who can reinvent himself in different roles and continue to build an audience even as he gets older and the audiences get younger. But we also look at in his chart what's going on with Neptune, because when you think of movies, that's pretty much one of the aspects involving movies. And so Neptune is in exact trine to his midheaven. So he's able to create that moving magic. When the camera rests on him, something comes through onto the screen that's almost indescribable, that no one can really actually control. It's kind of either there or not. And so we see that Neptune also in his second house, helping to build his wealth through movie acting. But also remember, Neptune and music go together. And so that's also powering that Neptune, that Gemini midheaven, helping him to put a lot of his passion and energy into his music career at the same time. And then finally, we've got Pluto in the chart. And so Pluto then is at 24 degrees of Leo. And Pluto is, at that time in history, was a Saturn-Pluto square. We're all kind of familiar with Saturn and Pluto since we recently have the conjunction in 2020. But this is kind of a battle between kind of what we're trying to do, our effort, Saturn, and immovable forces beyond our control with Pluto there. And so as we talked about, he was very good in his movie career at setting himself up against these enemies and overcoming them. But also in his actual life, we see Pluto is playing a role, squaring that Saturn, because third house, we think about that as being our mental processing. Speech and language fall into the third house, how we acquire information. And so with Saturn there, in square to Pluto, it would certainly suggest someone who's going to have some difficulties with some sort of communication and mental processing. It could also maybe during his career give him a lot of focus and help him to really dig into parts and learn them well. So, it's not like a sentence of doom, but one of the difficulties suggested could be something beyond his control, affecting his ability to communicate. And that has certainly become evident with him being diagnosed with aphasia last year. And notice too that Saturn is the ruler of this sixth house, which would affect our health crises. And so it's ruling his moon, which is conjunct Chiron, and Venus. And so this Saturn then, a mental incapacity in creating a health crisis in his chart. And so you think about too, Saturn has recently transited through Aquarius as his disease has progressed. Uranus has been on his Mars squaring it. So you can really see the heaviness of the aspects in his chart, especially over the last couple of years. And then one thing we haven't really touched on is that Virgo ascendant, which I think kind of adds to that kind of put together, cool look he always has about him. But also it's ruled by Mercury in Pisces, which is a sign in which it's in detriment. Mercury in a Pisces sign is very intuitive. Mercury in a Jupiter sign is very intuitive, able to really appreciate and take in much of the world, but it can get overwhelmed. And so having that kind of overwhelm experience could be part of the process of being diagnosed with a dementia. But also look at that Mercury. Let's kind of bring it back to that wonderful Jupiter in his chart, because it rules that Mercury. and that Jupiter is in conjunction to Uranus, which is inventions, inventiveness, newness. And so that Mercury, his chart ruler, being powered by this wonderful Jupiter, suggests to me that maybe some treatments will be available to him that will help him have a better quality of life. And also, if you think, what else does Jupiter rule in Bruce Willis's chart? Notice it rules that icy in Sagittarius. And we know from news reports that he is being very well taken care of. He has essentially 2 wives, a wife and an ex-wife who both love him very much, and 5 daughters. So isn't that something with Jupiter in Cancer for beneficence coming out of, coming everywhere around him. So he's got wonderful care around him, many people who love him, a kind of unusual, you think of Jupiter with Uranus, kind of an unusual blended family that have all kind of gotten together and decided that they're going to take the very best care of him that they possibly can. And so I think, well, there's certainly a lot of sadness in the diagnosis he's received, and you can certainly see it in some of the heavier transits in his chart. You can see a lot of hope in the chart as well, that he's going to live the best of all possible lives for as many years as he has left. And so I thank you all very much for listening to my talk on Bruce Willis's chart today. And I thank you as well, and I thank Bruce Willis as well for the many years of wonderful entertainment he's given us. And I wish him all the best in the future. Thank you.